Hey guys, so welcome to Reproduction and Meiosis Part 2. This video should be a little bit shorter. We are going to talk about now, we've talked about meiosis and what comes out of meiosis, the 4 haploid cells. Now we're going to talk about what occurs after that. So obviously, you guys are probably pretty aware of fertilization and all of that process, but there's a little bit more that goes on, and there's a couple of life cycles that I'd like you to know about in the process of this. All right, so after this video, you should be able to explain why sexual reproduction leads to variation in offspring, define life cycle, and identify different types of sexual life cycles. So really only 2 things, the other 2 things we covered in the last video. All right, so before we even begin, remember that after meiosis, we have formed, and this is after meiosis 2, so both processes of meiosis, we have formed 4 haploid cells. Now, believe it or not, those haploid cells are not fully gametes yet. And the reason for this is because they haven't undergone full maturity, or they're not in full maturity. And so they go through this process that's known as gametogenesis. And what gametogenesis is the development of haploid cells into gametes. So at haploid cells, they are not fully ready for fertilization. So it looks different when you are a male in comparison to a female. Males develop what's known as sperm, and females develop what's known as an egg. And then a couple of things that I didn't even write down, but you should be aware of, is that sperm undergoes a process known as spermiogenesis. And so it's where the sperm cell, or the haploid sperm, will mature. It grows that tail that helps it move and become a swimmer. And when those swimmers do their job correctly and they meet an egg, they can help in fertilization. The females, on the other hand, produce eggs. Now, great in the process known as oogenesis. Great little thing about females, though, is yes, they produce 4 haploid cells, but only 1 of those haploid cells will actually go on to become an egg. So you're almost essentially making 4, and 3 of those are useless. They don't develop into an egg. So that single egg is a very, very large cell in comparison to the sperm, incredibly large. And what it does is every month the egg is released and it waits in the uterine tube, and from there the sperm will meet the egg. If fertilization occurs correctly, if the sperm ends up penetrating the egg, fertilization will occur, and then the successful egg, or zygote if you will then implant into the female's uterus, which will then eventually result into a baby. So a lot of processes there, but a big thing I want you to know is that in females in oogenesis, only 1 of the 4 haploid cells matures to become an egg. Now there's a lot more that goes on in the female portion of creating the egg, but for the sake of this class, I just want you to know that only 1 of those haploid cells will go on to create a large egg. All right, so the $1 million question is that how come if you and your brother or you and your sister came from the same parents, how come you guys look nothing alike? And some brothers and sisters look completely alike, but then you have some brothers and sisters that look nothing alike. Or you have some brothers and sisters that, yes, you can tell they're brother and sister, but you wouldn't even think of it. So for example, I just found out Brett Sharp and Laren Sharp are brother and sister. Would never have guessed, not even in a million years. I don't feel like they look anything alike. I don't even feel like they act the same at all. So yes, they're brother and sister, have the same mom and dad. I hope I'm not wrong in that. But anyway, they have the same mom and dad. And so what makes them so different from one another, besides the fact that one's a male and one's a female? So I'm going to talk about a few reasons on how we create genetically unique individuals. Because believe it or not, you are here, and it's like a 1 in trillion chance that you are actually who you are. And there's so many things that could have gone different, that could have made you have blonde hair, or could have made you have a different blood type, or could have made you have, 10 fingers or 11 fingers. So there are tons of different things. And so there are 3 things I want you to know. So reasons, I guess, not things. So sexual reproduction results in offspring that are genetically unique, just like I said. They differ from both their parents and also from each other. So this occurs for many reasons, and the 3 reasons I want you to know about. The first one is known as crossing over. Crossing over is the exchange of genetic material between non sister chromatids of homologous chromosomes. All right, so I'm going to draw this really quickly. So remember, we have a chromosome here from your mom, chromosome here from your dad. These are what's known as homologous chromosomes. They contain the same type of information, but it's not genetically identical. Now, after they replicate, remember, you have the exact same copy and you created a chromatid. Well, what crossing over is crossing over is taking, I'm going to see, I can't change my pen color. Oh, yes, I can. So crossing over is like taking a piece of one of those chromosomes and it crosses with the other non-homologous or non-sister chromatid of homologous chromosomes. So let me go ahead and draw that too, because I feel like I'm like looking at your faces right now and you guys are really confused. All right, so we've done replication. We have 4 chromatids here. I know that picture is not very nice, but we have 4 chromatids here. What crossing over is we're taking this piece from here and we're putting it over on here, on this side or on this opposite homologous chromosome. Okay, so these two, this one and this one, are not sisters of one another. This guy and this guy are not sisters of one another. Only, I'm going to use a different color, only this guy and this guy, or these chromatids, are sisters of each other. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, I will show you in class. But crossing over is when you have a piece of genetic material that will exchange with another homologous chromosome. And what this does is this gives you a nice different combination of genes on each chromosome. So you may very well have something super unique to just you because that crossing over is super independent, super unique. It only happens by chance. Okay, so you don't know when someone goes into like not fertilization, but into reproduction, they're not thinking what's going to cross over because you don't know what genes could cross over. So for example, your dad may have a characteristic about him that you have on the off chance that crossing over occurred on that chromosome that you inherited. So the chances of you being you get smaller and smaller. So it's a super amazing process that you are who you are. The second way is random distribution of homologous chromosomes. So remember, sorry, there was a fly and it was really bugging me, so that's why I clapped. But anyway, remember that you have homologous chromosomes in meiosis, and you do not know which chromosome is going to which side in meiosis 1. And then in meiosis 2, you do not know which chromatid is going to separate, and that's going to become the sperm that develops into you. Because all 4 of those haploid cells that developed for the sperm have different genetic material just based off independent assortment. So independent assortment means that they will independently go by themselves. So that means not all of mom's chromosomes came to you and not all of dad's chromosomes came to you. There was just a random distribution of them independently. And then the same thing can be said for the egg. Remember, only only one of those haploid cells becomes the egg. So that means there's not as much of a chance that you're going to get something from your mom in comparison to all the sperm that's available within the male. And then finally, the third reason is because random gametes unite. And I know that's kind of obvious, but like for reproduction, you don't get to pick which gamete you use to reproduce. So a woman doesn't just drop the egg she feels is the best egg in the world. Nope, your body just drops an egg. And the male doesn't get to pick the sperm that will fertilize the egg. Nope, the fastest swimmer wins. That's how the game goes. So you guys, congratulations, are all the fastest swimmers. You all won a race in your life. So those are the 3 reasons on why you are so unique and so just you and individualized. So it's pretty amazing that all of these things had to work perfectly to create you. I think it's pretty phenomenal. You don't have to think that, but whatever. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is sexual reproduction and life cycles. There are different life cycles that different organisms undergo. So for example, I should go on with what a life cycle is. It's a series of life stages and events that a sexually reproducing organism goes through. 3 different types. There's a haploid, diploid, and alternation of generations. So a haploid life cycle is when an organism spends most of its time in a haploid state These are generally single-celled organisms. You're not going to find I don't think you're going to find any multicellular organisms that will undergo this. They will decide, oh, it's time to go ahead and create some gametes. They will fuse and then create a diploid zygote for a little bit. That diploid zygote will then come back and become haploid. In the diploid life cycle, organisms, they will be diploid for a majority or a lot of their life. And then when they feel it's ready to produce, typically in humans, this will happen when you hit puberty. Your body decides it's time to reproduce. And then then you start creating that sperm and that egg. And for females, this is in the process of your menses or your menstrual cycle. And then in males, obviously, it's just the development of sperm. Gametes will then unite in fertilization and form a diploid zygote. The zygote develops into a diploid and then repeats the life cycle. So yes, our body is always making diploid cells, but until we hit puberty, we're not truly making a lot of those haploid cells. And then finally, we have what's known as alternation of generations. And so what this is it's the idea that organisms will go back and forth within haploid and diploid. And this can be really, really weird and complicated. And we're going to talk about it later in chapters, so it's more common though in like plants, algae, and protists. So not really a human thing. That would be really difficult as a human. And that's pretty well the video. If you have any questions, please ask me on Edpuzzle.